Okay, there's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. Here is my review of episode 3 of Agatha All Along. Episode 3 starts right where episode 2 left us. They are on the road and they start walking. Agatha gives everybody another pep talk about how the road is going to give them what they want, and that's when they notice that Mrs. Hart is gone. Mrs. Hart is freaking out, and she has every right to be. She's not a witch, she doesn't have any magical abilities, and she finds herself on the witch's road. The coven does their best to calm Mrs. Hart down. Understandably, she's still freaked out though, and they start walking, and that's when they notice the house. It's a beautiful house, so they head towards it. My favorite part is when Mrs. Hart rings the doorbell and says, "We don't want to surprise anybody," and then Agatha's like, "Don't we?" and she just walks in, and the rest of the coven follows her. And when Mrs. Hart wipes her feet on the mat, I lost it. That was the funny part for me. After they head into their house, that's when they find a card stuck on a mantle, and it's basically telling them that this is their first trial, and it gives them a riddle that they have to solve. While they're all trying to figure out the riddle, that's when Mrs. Hart notices a bottle of wine with 5 glasses, and she says, "Wine!" And they're like, "Oh, that's the answer." Agatha pours everybody a glass of wine except Teen because he's underage, and then they drink it, and that's when the troubles start. Mrs. Hart drinks her glass, and then she drinks another glass, so in total she has 2 glasses, and that's important to remember because in my theory, I think that's why what happens. Agatha does not drink her glass, though. She dumps it into a plant, and then she sets the glass down, and we notice that the glass refills. They all go sit on the couch to finish their glasses of wine, and that's when they notice that Mrs. Hart's face looks disfigured. It looks swollen. She starts freaking out, and that's when everybody notices that their face is swollen, except Agatha's because she didn't drink the wine, but she pretends that she did, and she covers her face with her hair. They come to the conclusion that they have been poisoned. The wine was poisoned. Jen starts to ask Mrs. Hart some question because she was the first one to drink the glass, and she's trying to identify the poison. Mrs. Hart doesn't give her any real clear answers, but after a moment, the disfiguration and the swelling goes away, and that's when Jen realizes what the poison is. That's when they realize that Agatha didn't drink the wine to begin with, so they're all pressuring her to drink it now. Agatha throws the cup on the ground, breaking it and splashing the wine everywhere because she's like, "I'm not going to drink it. I don't have to follow these rules." The coven tells her she has to or they can't do the trial, and she's like, "What am I supposed to do? There's no more wine." And that's when another glass starts filling up. She still is on the edge of not drinking it, though. That's when Teen says, "Fine, I'll drink it." And she says, "No," and almost pushes him out the way, and she takes the glass and she drinks it. And another funny part is that when she's done, she's like, "Oh, it's so cheap." Then Jen gets to work on trying to make an antidote. She goes to the kitchen and she's looking for all the ingredients. Again, without going into too much detail, they each split up to find ingredients for the antidote, and that's when each witch starts having hallucinations. It's only for a moment that each hallucination occurs, but it leaves each and every one of the witches distraught. After each team finds the ingredients, they head back to the kitchen, and that's when Jen starts working her magic. Hold on, I did forget to say that we finally get mention of Mephisto in an MCU project. Earlier in the episode, Jen pulls Teen aside and is like, "Watch your back with Agatha, be careful." Teen says, "I know what people say about her, I know what people think about her," and Jen's like, "Do you? Do you know that she traded her son for the Book of the Damned? Yeah, they don't know if he's alive, some say he's a demon, some say he's an agent of Mephisto." That's where we get our mention of Mephisto, which is very exciting. I don't know what they plan to do, but it gave birth to a lot of new theories. Back to the episode. Jen is making the antidote, and because she's been poisoned, she needs Teen's help. Teen does everything that Jen tells him to do, but the antidote is still not working. Jen starts spiraling because her hallucination really knocked her confidence, and she's saying she can't do it, she's magically bound, she can't help. Agatha gives Jen a little pep talk, and that's when Jen gets her head straight and she remembers the missing ingredient. Once they have all the ingredients in the cauldron, all that's missing is a piece of hair from everyone in the coven. Another thing to remember, Mrs. Hart is on the kitchen table passed out from her hallucination, so her hair doesn't make it to the cauldron. That's an important detail to remember because I believe that's why what happens. After everyone else puts their hair in the cauldron, that's when it turns blue and they all have to drink it. That's when they all take a little shot of the antidote, and they have 5 seconds left on the timer, but they realize Mrs. Hart didn't get hers. So they rush over to her, they give her their antidote, and at this point in the show, you still see Mrs. Hart has some movement. After Mrs. Hart gets her antidote, that's when the oven door opens and they realize that the way out of the house is through the oven. There's a little joke about the oven and witches, but then after that, they all take their turns going out through the oven. Agatha, Alice, and Teen pick up Mrs. Hart and slide her down the oven because she is still unconscious at this point. After the last witch slides out the oven, it closes and we get a cut back to the road. Once they are back on the road, they all realize they're safe and that they made it through the first trial, except Mrs. Hart. Mrs. Hart is not safe. In fact, Mrs. Hart has died. Teen says Sharon is dead, and Agatha says, "Who's Sharon?" Because obviously she's still calling Mrs. Hart Mrs. Hart. Why'd they have to do Mrs. Hart like that? I don't know. I was really excited about her coming back for the show, and now she's just gone. It was very heartbreaking, and I still don't know how I feel about it. Except disappointed. Very sad that she had to die. it's just heartbreaking. I have some theories about why and how it happened. I'm not going to be sharing those theories on the recaps, but if you guys want that, leave a comment letting me know. Alright, make sure to come back to my channel for more recaps. You guys have a magical day. Bye!